that I'm officially 3 for 3 on being fined by the WNBA.
Holy shit. For this? For the pod? Again?
They didn't like my comments on Paige Bueckers.
No way.
I didn't even say anything bad.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Sophie Cunningham is officially 3 for 3 on being fined by the WNBA, and this is turning into one of the wildest sagas women's basketball has ever seen. She literally dropped the news on her own podcast saying the league came after her again just for speaking her mind. And the crazy part is, she didn't even say anything bad at all. Just some basic comments about Paige Bueckers, but somehow that was enough to trigger another fine. Now, frustration is boiling over fans everywhere are calling out the WNBA for trying to silence one of the only players bold enough to tell the truth. Sophie Cunningham supporters are flooding social media saying enough is enough, they want her voice heard, and they're demanding transparency. Because this isn't just about basketball anymore, it's about free speech inside the league. And what happens when an athlete refuses to stay quiet, no matter how much it costs her?
As the WNBA have done it. They have done it. They have officially fined Sophie Cunningham every podcast episode. They have fined her. Because Sophie Cunningham has been fined. I'm not joking. She's been fined for a TikTok. She's been fined now, I think, for the 3rd time for a podcast. I think Sophie Cunningham might be the all-time leader in fines in the WNBA. So let's take a listen.
Sophie Cunningham has officially become the most fined player in the entire WNBA. And that is no exaggeration. Every single time she drops a new podcast episode, the league hits her with another penalty. It started with a TikTok, then her very first podcast, and now again, after simply mentioning Paige Bueckers, it's reached the point where fans are openly calling her the voice of truth in women's basketball, because what began as harmless commentary has exploded into a full-blown war between one outspoken player and a league desperate to control every narrative. Yet, despite the constant financial pressure, Sophie refuses to back down. Instead, she's doubling down, exposing how the WNBA prioritizes image over honesty, and how this systematic campaign to silence her only proves the very point she's been making from the start. And here's where the whole situation turns even uglier, because Sophie flat out said the league is failing at the one job that actually matters. Protecting its players, she didn't sugarcoat it. She made it clear that nobody's going to watch if the WNBA keeps hanging its stars out to dry. And she's right. People tune in for Caitlin Clark. They tune in for Sophie Cunningham. But when those stars are constantly left unprotected by bad officiating and a league office that seems more worried about collecting fines than fixing problems, it destroys the product on the floor. Fans are watching their favorite players take brutal hits, sit out games with injuries, and all the league does is hand out penalties for telling the truth. Sophie called it worthless. She said flat out that the organization doesn't know how to protect its players, and if that continues, no one's going to stick around to watch. What should have been a simple routine podcast episode turned into a bombshell revelation because Sophie finally pulled back the curtain on how the WNBA really works. She and her co-host Wes Wilson launched Show Me Something, thinking it would be a space for open and honest conversations about the game. But instead, every episode has become another reminder that the league wants complete control of every story she tells. The moment she spoke about officiating consistency, or even mentioned names like Paige Bueckers, the fines came rolling in, and yet, instead of silencing her, it's only made her more powerful because Sophie has turned herself into one of the 5 most talked about players in the league. Her podcast clips spread like wildfire across social media, and fans can't get enough of her blunt, unapologetic takes. She's embraced the role of the outspoken villain, and honestly, it might be the most compelling storyline the WNBA has right now. On her latest episode, Sophie dropped the line that had fans stunned. She said, "I'm officially 3 for 3 on being fined by the WNBA." And you could hear the frustration in her voice because, think about it, this is a player who is literally paying thousands just for speaking her mind. And what was her so-called offense this time? Making a harmless comment about Paige Bueckers getting favorable whistles? That's it. Nothing malicious, nothing personal, yet the league treated it like a major violation and slapped her again. But here's the twist. Instead of apologizing or backing off, Sophie fired back. She made it clear these fines were never about protecting the game. They were intimidation tactics designed to scare her into silence. And it's backfiring because every new fine is turning her into an even bigger voice for the fans, who are sick of seeing the league dodge accountability. The moment Sophie revealed, this fans rallied around her like never before. Social media absolutely erupted, with people calling her the truth teller and demanding the league stop targeting her because at this point, it's obvious the WNBA is choosing when to enforce rules and when to look the other way. Sophie laid it out perfectly. Players can curse each other out on the court, they can stand over opponents, they can even openly complain about referees in press conferences, and nothing happens. But the second she points out something as small as officiating inconsistencies, suddenly it's a crime worthy of another fine. The double standard couldn't be clearer, and it's left fans furious. They see the hypocrisy, and they're asking the same question. Why is honesty punished, but actual bad behavior ignored? And this is where Sophie's situation becomes downright alarming, because she isn't being fined for lying or trash talking. She's being punished for saying things that any reasonable fan already notices. Every single game, she pointed out how referees are inconsistent. She questioned why certain players get different treatment, and suddenly, that's enough to cost her hundreds, even thousands of dollars. The WNBA has basically created a system where speaking the truth about the product gets you penalized, and the numbers prove it. First, she got hit with a $500 fine for a lighthearted TikTok, then $1, $500 for comments on her very first podcast episode, and now another undisclosed fine just for suggesting Paige Bueckers gets favorable whistles. It's a pattern, it's systematic, and it's turning what should be fun, authentic content into a financial minefield. At this point, it's impossible to ignore the bigger picture because what the WNBA is really doing is sending a message to every other player in the league. Stay quiet or you'll pay the price. Sophie even explained how it goes down. Her GM literally pulls her aside in front of teammates and says, "Hey, the league is fining you again like it's become routine." And that's the problem because now you've got players watching this unfold and realizing if Sophie can get hammered for something as small as saying Paige Bueckers has a good whistle, then nobody is safe. This isn't about maintaining professionalism. This is about fear. It's about creating a culture where athletes second guess every word that comes out of their mouth, and fans are furious because they don't want scripted robotic interviews. They want the raw truth. And Sophie is the only one brave enough to keep giving it to them. And now we've reached the breaking point because Sophie has turned what the league thought would be a cautionary tale into the biggest storyline in women's basketball. Instead of silencing her, these nonstop fines have made her the most authentic voice in the WNBA. Her podcast has become must-watch content. Clips are going viral. Fans are demanding change, and the league looks completely out of touch by trying to muzzle her when they should be embracing her as free. Marketing, even other players are paying attention, wondering if it's even safe to speak their minds anymore. And that's the real danger here. The WNBA has created a culture where honesty is treated like a threat, while fans are literally begging for transparency. Sophie Cunningham is refusing to fold, and in doing so, she's exposing every crack in the system. So here's the reality. The WNBA had everything it could have possibly wanted in Sophie Cunningham, an outspoken star with charisma, a podcast that connects directly with fans, and a platform that generates headlines for the league without them spending a dime. But instead of celebrating her, they've tried to fine her into silence. And it's backfired spectacularly because fans are now rallying behind Sophie more than ever, calling her the truth teller, the voice of honesty in a league that feels more interested in control than growth. Every fine only fuels her message. Every penalty only makes her words more powerful. And at this point, the question isn't whether Sophie will keep speaking up because she's made it clear she won't back down. The real question is whether the WNBA can survive the damage it's doing to its own reputation by trying to silence the one player fearless enough to tell the truth. Sophie Cunningham is proving that authenticity always wins, and fans are showing they'd rather stand with her than with a league that refuses to listen.